I'm thrilled to have Dale Whitaker on the show today. On the other hand, I've been interested in Dale for a while now and have been talking to him mostly in vague terms. The same things he's talked about on a lot of shows. I've talked about the same things he has for more than a year. Also, Dale knows things that aren't public and has the guts to call people out. That's not something I've done. This show sounds like it would be great for you. It's important for people who own gold, especially those with an IRA. Dale, thanks for coming on the show. I'm glad you came. Andy, thanks for having me. Thanks for that. Okay, Dale, for those who don't know what you do, tell them what your goal is. In recent weeks, you've been in the news for revealing what you call deeply unethical behavior. Without a doubt, it's very deep. I mean, it's some of the worst things I've ever seen at work. In fact, they were possibly the worst things I've ever seen at work. And of course, these things happen in the gold and rare metals business. For people who don't know your story, what made you come forward and what is your goal now that you have? The second question is easy, so I'll begin with it. My goal is to destroy the part of the business that does these things to people and keeps them from retiring. That easy, I will do whatever it takes to save people's life savings. That's the most important thing to me. That's also kind of what made me blow the whistle. Well, there were a number of things that led up to that point. This is something I talk about in my book, but I'd like people to be able to find out about it without having to buy or read my book. I've talked more about this in other talks, but there was a chain of events that began when my assistant at the time brought up some questionable markups and other things on our coins. I thought it was silly at the time, since both parties were willing to buy and sell. The buyer buys it from us for X dollars, and then we sell it to them for Y dollars. It's very easy. That's not true, though. I worked from home, which is what made me realize what was going on. Our main office was in Culver City, California, but I worked from home in Washington, D.C. Isaac Narani, the CEO, called me and asked me to change the range on a buyback of 5,000 silver coins. A customer wanted to return 5,000 of our gold coins and pay us back. He calls me and says, "Hey, we have a client who wants to sell back 5,000 coins. I say, "Okay, great. What's the client's name? I'll write the PO. Easy, right? It's very easy to figure out your spread." He then says, "Well, I don't want to pay that much, so I want you to raise the spread. That way, we'll pay the client less." That's when I knew what the deal was. I understood what was going on, and I said no, snorts. I told them, "Nope, I'm not going to do that." I remember that day very, very clearly. I also remember that Isaac's tone of voice was clear on Skype. He laughed and tilted his head a little. He then understood that I was telling the truth and that I had no plans to change the spread. He asked, "Are you serious?" I replied, "Yes." I told him, "Our clients have agreed that our spread is 29%, which, as you know, is a crazy spread. We are going to pay back 29%. We are going to pay them back at the rate of 29% spread." He then says, "Okay, man, just change it. What's the big deal?" I believe this was him testing me to see how far I would go, or even if I would go there at all. I told them, "No, I'm not going to do it. You." I also told them, "You do what you want to do, but leave me out of it." My wife was working from home. I'm sorry, but my wife wasn't working that day, and I work from home. That's why my office was in the basement. I then ran upstairs. She was making lunch in the kitchen. I was filled with energy and thought, something is terribly wrong. Like something is wrong. At that point, I didn't know what to do. But then I started to look into what I do. When I finally got in touch with them, my first thought was, I just need to tell people. I then thought, if I can get the information into the right hands, and so on. So I started talking to reporters, and one of them told me to talk to a leak lawyer and blow the whistle. I had never heard of this before. After that, I did some study, and snorts, she actually told me about a firm that had helped another client who had blown the whistle write their book. She also told me about the firm that her client had used for her expose. To get help, I called the James Hoyer law firm in Florida. Together, we wrote up our whistleblower report and sent it to the CFTC. I clears throat. I mean, thank you. God bless you is pretty much the only thing that makes sense to me, because you're right. There's something very wrong with that plan. At a meeting, some people have come up to me. One old man cried and told me, "My wife is in the audience here. If she finds out what you just said about me, the victim on stage in Canada, she's going to leave me. This is all we have." The things I've seen are so horrible that they can't even be made up. While I'm trying to be as honest as possible about this without giving away names or anything, I went on a bunch of shows and talked about this because I want people to know that it's just as bad, if not worse, than what Dale is moving on to. Dale, you said off-air that when you left the company, you were worth about $40 million after taking into account the 30% plus markups. Is that right? In fact, it's much worse than that. Okay, so we climbed. I was the second person to walk in. There was a man there before me. Jeff Ward was his name. So I think I'll start from the beginning, if that's okay with you. At that point, Isaac Noorani was the CEO of Augusta Precious Metals and also worked for a business called Merit Financial. The city of Santa Monica sued Merit Financial for theft, dishonest sales practices, and other things. A case was filed against Merit Financial, and Isaac was named in it. However, he was later dropped because he worked for the company and other things. There was some formal ease there, but that was it. Because of this, Isaac quit the company around this time and used the money he had saved from being one of the best salespeople at Merit to start Augusta Precious Metals. Now, Merit Financial made around $200 million a year. That's how big they were. Using the same exact plan, they were making a lot of money. Isaac had just started Augusta Precious Metals and was ready to start growing. He started to hire people through Craigslist. To put it simply, he hired a man named Jeffrey Ward. Ward was later sued for $76 million by the CFTC, the SEC, a company called Red Rock Secured, and a man named Shay Johnson Kelly. I have shots of myself at my wedding with these guys. I know these guys, right? It was like I worked with them. They came to my wedding. So the cheating has been going on. In other words, this case began in 2012 and ended when Merit had to close their doors in 2014. Isaac began, then brought on Jeff, and then he brought on me. Then, when Merit Financial went out of business, Shay Johnson Kelly, who later started Red Rock Secure, was sued to the ground, and the guys went to Isaac's office because it was just a few blocks from Merit's main office. A sign on the door said, "Hey, we're closed. See you later. Good luck." The guys took Merit's tips and went over to Augusta. They stole the lead information and asked Augusta, "Hey man, we don't have a job. Are you ready to go with Augusta?" Because they knew that Augusta was friendly with J. Johnson Kelly. They knew he was going to start Augusta. And, Isaac turned his living room into a boiler room sales floor. They started calling cold leads from the honor leads, and things kind of took off from there. In 2014, we made maybe a few $100,000. In 2017, we made about $42 to $45 million in gross sales with a net profit margin of about 15 to 20%. As you know, that kind of net profit margin doesn't exist in the rare metals business. 5 or 6 times what we earn. Yes, of course. At 15%, we'll make 7 figures, or $800 million. You have to be competitive at 2 or 2% to stay in business. 5% would be great if you can get it after all the costs and shipping you pay for, but most of the time it's 1% or less. I'm sorry. Please keep going. Sure, yes, you're fine and right on the mark. That difference is very important to me. I wasn't in the special smell space before this. At the time, I worked as a private accountant. I was getting freelance work, and I'd do things like take a client's full year of records and sit down for 8 hours straight to make financial accounts. At the time, that was kind of my job. So the only way I found Augusta was by doing gig work. After that, they offered me a full-time job, which I accepted. There were some red flags over the years, things that, in hindsight, make it so clear that this was going on when added up. But I didn't really have direct access to the sales floor because I was in Washington State and the headquarters were down there. I didn't see how the sales floor moved, how the salesman closed deals, how he talked to people and other things. A big part of how they do this is by making people afraid. They use what I call the car dealership method a lot of the time, which is just plain force. Everyone who has ever bought a new car knows that when you go to the showroom, they keep you there all day, right? Over time, they try to break you down and sell you these sets and other things. Sometimes they'll talk to a customer on the phone and get to know them before making a sale. This can take days instead of just saying, hey, I want to buy gold American Eagles, and you know what? Here we are, and we're done right out the door. That's not what they do. Their first goal is to get to know their clients and earn their trust, which they then use against them. Over time, I've seen these things kind of on their own, and then I realized that they're changing the spread, which is where the real fraud is. I thought, oh crap, these guys are really taking a lot of people's retirement money. One of the things you've said so far is what I thought, and it fits perfectly with what I've been saying on other shows. You've talked about it on both Beyond Mystic shows with Adam Taggart, Robert Kiyosaki, and other people. Sarah Westall and Kyle Sarafan have also talked about it. We've talked about this, and what you told me about Worth going away and becoming a thing in Red Rock and Augusta is very interesting. This is what I say on these shows. I don't name anyone. It's interesting that all of these companies, and some you haven't even named yet, do the same thing. They all do the same thing. They usually sell quarter-ounce gold coins for around $1,000. I said that when the price of an ounce of gold was $2,000, but they'll sell them for much more. The coins always come from well-known mints, but the designs are things you haven't heard of. You've never heard of these coins, like the Royal Canadian Mint's quarter-ounce giant bear. That doesn't mean they don't make a grizzly bear quarter-ounce coin sometimes. To put it another way, they call it a special version. What I think these companies do is they go to the Royal Canadian Mint, the Perth Mint, or the UK Mint, and make a deal to buy a mold, or make a die. Then they make their own coins that only they can make, and they call them special or something. It's also true for silver. The huge bonuses are always between half an ounce and 1.5 ounce. That is, you have 5 or 6 businesses that all do the same thing. All of them. It's more than 5 or 6. There are a lot of them, and some of them just pop up, making me wonder where they're from. Yes. It's important to understand that Augusta was born from merit, and Red Rock was born from Augusta. It does this all the time. This always happens because salespeople who are smart enough to know that the real money is in running the business will make their little clicks. You guys in sales know how this works, right? Sales teams have people they like and click with. They build these clicks and then think, hey, why are we selling for this guy and making him a multimillionaire when we can just start our own business and become multimillionaires ourselves? That's exactly what drives this whole thing. Greed. In other words, Shay Johnson Kelly made $650,000 a year as vice president of Augusta and worked 30 hours a week. That's more than money for the doctor. His normal job would be to flip burgers at McDonald's. He does not have any other proof. He doesn't have anything. He's really smart. I mean, I don't think that going to school always makes you smart. He seems smart, but the truth is that he has never done anything but sell things. Okay. But what kind of seller makes $6.5 million a year? Yes. It was ridiculously much money. I want people to understand that this is straight-up white-collar crime from my point of view. The fact that I live in Delray Beach is one reason I left Miles Franklin in Minnesota. Boca is where I work. The reason I moved to Florida, or the reason I left my company office in Minnesota when I moved to Florida. It's been almost 20 years since we set up a satellite office here in Florida. I moved here from Minnesota during the George Floyd riots. There is only one state in the US that regulates an industry that is not controlled by the federal government. That's why I didn't bring my business with me. So, we have to live up to a lot more expectations. That's pretty much the only company that would never do business in Minnesota. Every year, they would need to get a license, a bond, and a security check. But I want people to know that what these people are doing is a clear case of white-collar crime. Since you didn't walk me through it, you just talked about it briefly. But I think this is something that people who think they may have been involved with some of the companies should really think about. How does I'm going to call it the scam? Because it is a scam. How does it work in real life? How are the buyers being lied to? Where the heck is the real money being made against their will? All right? Because of this, the short answer to your question is, it's complicated. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. Now let's say you call and say, I have $4 million in my IRA. You get approved. They make you eligible, right? Make it sound important. I am going to qualify you and you so that they seem more important. We're the best gold company, etc. Which, as you and I both know, doesn't exist, right? Just like at any other business, different places offer different amounts of service. In this way, they give off an air of status. They let you in. When you call, you'll talk to an account executive, who is sometimes called a junior sales account executive, AE. They would already know you are qualified, and they would work directly for a top account executive who is like the good salesman. The junior is picking up tips from the master. So this is how it works. Now, if the junior can sell you these special coins, they will get some of the fee that the senior gets. So, you call, and it sounds like you want gold Canadian maple leafs or American eagles, or maybe you want a job grant. You would just like the common bullion that Andy or someone else has talked about, and you want to buy. They will go through the whole sales process, which you probably already know, right, Andy? The money will come to them through the caretaker. They will make sure the money is with the C caretaker and other things. Then they'll promise to sell the person their gold eagles. This is how much we charge. They then say, okay. So the customer will ask the custodian to send the money to Augusta and start the deal. And then what will happen is they will get a call from the salesman and say, hey, I want to tell you about this other coin that I think is better for you in your portfolio. I think this coin is going to be a lot better for you. It performs better over time, and so on and so on and so on. And then they start hyping up this coin, and then the customer might be a little skeptical. And this is where the car dealership method comes in, where I was talking about earlier, where they will weigh you down over time. They will talk to you for hours and hours and hours. And in one instance, what I witnessed was absolutely crazy in hindsight. A client was not on board at all. They did not want the coin. And what they would call these people, by the way, it was a derogatory term that they would use, is a bully head, bullion bully. So if you weren't interested at all in the premium coin, they would call you a bully head. So if someone placed a trade and the person, the salesman called me, for example, and we were talking about a specific customer, if that customer would not buy these coins that they wanted to sell them, that they'd make all the commission off of, they would be like, oh yeah, he's a bully head. Just sell him whatever and move on. So you'd call in and they'd wear you down over time. Now you have to remember that, clear's throat, at the time, Augusta were paying 0% commission on the American Eagles and Krugs and any bullion products, but selling, at one point, our commission was 15% on the exclusive premium coins. So if I'm a salesman, the only incentive I have to sell you anything is to sell you the exclusive premium coins. Have zero incentive to sell you the bullion. And in fact, this became such a contentious problem because when they couldn't flip what they would call flip someone, right? It's like a bait and switch. You couldn't flip them into the premium coins. The salesman would be pissed. They go to Isaac and they'd say, hey, this is $500,000. I worked on this client for 3 days. I just couldn't get him to flip, blah, blah, blah. So we actually ended up at one point starting to pay 1% or 1.5% on bullion. And so there was a direct incentive, but even still, you're talking 15% versus 1%, and that's without bonuses. There were commission-structured bonuses. So if you had earned $5,000, so not sold $5,000 in product, but if you had earned $5,000 in commission, you had a small bonus like $250, and then $10,000 you'd get $500. $20,000 down, you'd get a $5,000 bonus. It was crazy. The incentive structure was completely centered around these coins. So a lot of people, and I'm sure you've witnessed this, with that gentleman that you were talking about earlier, when I'm talking to them, they say, I'm so embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. And I've seen many, many highly intelligent people, people with PhDs that were swindled. And a lot of this is because it's a big con game. It is a massive con game. These guys are the best at what they do. They could sell you your shoes. They could take your shoes off your feet and sell them to you and then make you thank them for the privilege of doing it. They're really good. That's just what it comes down to. And so I hear a lot of people when I talk about this, well, how dumb do you have to be, and so on. It's not that. It is so much more than that. These people build trust and then they exploit the trust.